Hello, this is Jason. It's July 31st here in the orchard, and I finally want to talk about this tree right here, which is my cherry plum. It is mature enough to produce fruit, and so I can give you a little insight into what the fruit looks like, its development, and ultimately its taste. So this is not the first time that I featured this tree in my videos. I've talked about it before, but it's always been in anticipation. This tree is 3.5 years old, and it has two cultivars of cherry plums on it. It has a cultivar called Delight, and it has one called Sprite. I did a multi-graft because I actually had these on separate rootstocks, and unfortunately one of my rootstocks died back on me, and so I had to regraft Sprite a year later. So while it may be hard to tell in this video, Delight has a little bit of a head start, has a 1-year head start, so it takes up a little bit more of the space here on this tree, and Sprite is right here in the foreground. And that's actually not a problem, because the more I read about this tree, the more I learned that Delight is the heavy producer. If you look over here at this branch, you'll see the whole branch is lined with cherry plums. This is the Delight side. If I come over here to Sprite, now granted it is 1 year younger, so I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, but Sprite is more of the pollinizer. It will produce less fruit than Delight, but it is sort of essential to have. And I learned that because when Sprite was not producing flowers for Delight, Delight was not setting fruit. Over here on this side of the orchard, I have pluots and plums and more pluots and more pluots and cherry plums and pluaries and regular cherries, and none of them seem to have the right pollen or maybe the right timing to pollinate Delight. It wasn't until Sprite came online that I finally got my first fruit to set, and that just happened to be this year. So as I pan back, and you can now see the division here between the trees, my first piece of knowledge that I'd like to share, at least this is in my experience, that if you were to grow these two trees, I would give Delight way more space, and I would keep Sprite on the smaller side. I feel like this closest equivalent I could think of is like a kiwi, where you can grow 10 females and have them all pollinized by one male. I don't need a lot of Sprite. It does not produce as heavily, but it is necessary to cross-pollinate Delight. So that's point number one that I'd like to mention. If you're going to grow these cherry plums, make sure that you have both cultivars, because in my experience, having just one will not give you fruit. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is the fruit itself. I want to give you an idea of what size we're talking about here. Cherry plums, while it has the word cherry in the name, has no cherry at all. This is actually a cross between an ornamental plum and a Japanese plum. I grow quite a few Japanese plums over here, or at least they're crossed with Japanese plums, and that's because Japanese plums have lower chill hours on average than, let's say, a European plum. What we have here is a tree that can handle low chill hours, and it's also crossed with another tree that is not really known for its fruit. It's known for its ornamental properties. I have an ornamental plum tree. It's called a Crowder Vesuvius. It's in my front yard. I don't grow it for the fruit. I grow it because it has beautiful red leaves. And so this cherry plum, again, like I said earlier, there's no actual cherry in it. It is a plum and plum cross, but they are two different types of plums, two different types of prunus. So the fruit that grows on here is small like a cherry. As I hold it up here, you'll see that it's larger than a cherry, but smaller than a traditional plum. And so that's where it gets its name from, not because it has any cherry. This just makes it super confusing, because there are so many types of fruit called cherry plum that you can kind of get lost in all the different terminology. This is not a pluary, which actually does have cherry in it, and it's also not the cherry plum that's trademarked, that I believe is a brand that you could purchase in the supermarket, like you would buy a Halo or a Cutie. So again, this is a distinct fruit. It's a different fruit than what you might be used to, although some of my commenters on prior videos from Europe have said, yeah, you know, we have these growing all over the place. So I feel like this is not a very popular tree in North America, at least not here in California, but in other parts of the world, these are way more well known. So that's a little bit about the name. So here's what the fruit looks like. Again, I'm in Zone 10B here, Southern California, San Diego County, and it is July 31st in the orchard. When this fruit first sets, it's green, it turns a shade of red, and then it progressively turns darker red until it takes on this dark purple, almost black color. I was a little tempted to pick it right away, and I did to 1 or 2, and I realized very early on that they stay firm to the touch for weeks. This tree needs a lot of hang time, or a lot of time to ripen up and fully develop on the tree. If you see the color change and you pick them off, you're going to be disappointed, and that's because when these are not ripe, they are very sour. They're tart on the skin. And that's not a problem for a larger prune, or a larger a larger plum that is going to have a greater flesh to skin ratio. So if you get a little bit of tartness on a larger plum, it's okay because it's balanced out by all of the sweet flesh. Here, since these fruit are smaller, there's way more skin when compared to the flesh. So when you take a bite, you're going to get way more of that tart flavor, and it's not going to quite balance out with the sweetness. So you need to let these sit. In fact, here we are, like I said, July 31st here in the orchard, and the majority of these are still firm to the touch. That's another thing that I'd like to share with you that was very surprising, that these fruit need a lot of time to fully develop on the tree. Yeah, as I go around here, they're starting to turn a little bit softer, but it's still, again, way too firm to pick all of the fruit off this tree. Rub off that bloom, you can see how it has a very, very dark purple. I know of a paint called Beluga. It's a very, very deep dark purple, almost black color. So if we go ahead and bite into that, we have a yellowish orange flesh. And this one just happened to be ripe. It is extremely juicy. It's nice and sweet. The tartness has almost completely disappeared. And it was worth the wait. These are pretty tasty. I wouldn't say this is my top choice of fruit. I wouldn't grow this if I only had room to grow, say, 3 or 5 plum trees. But I have a little bit more room that I know I'm very fortunate in that regard. So if this was on my list, I would probably make sure that I have my traditional plums, maybe a Santa Rosa or, a regular old classic plum, and maybe some pluots. I really like Flavor King over here, which is just about to ripen up. And then maybe a few or more, maybe yellow flesh or green, yellow skin or green skin plums. And then once I satisfy all that, maybe I would put these cherry plums in the ground. I like them. It just wouldn't be at the top of my list. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that. That just means that there's so much diversity and variety in the prunus genus. There are so many different types of pluaries and pluots and apriums and regular plums that this is good, but man, it's hard when there's just so many amazing options out there. So would I recommend this? Well, you got to put the time in, you got to put the patience in. You need to make sure that you have both a fruiting cultivar for me that's Delight and Sprite to help pollinize. I have not actually tried the Sprite cherry plums, but I've heard that really Delight is where it's at. This is where the fruit comes from, and this provides the pollen. And then you need to be patient. You need to make sure that you don't have pest pressure and that you're going to have your entire crop wiped out before you can enjoy any of these cherry plums. If you're in an area where the birds are going to annihilate your trees, and these fruit need at least a month to fully develop on the tree once they turn color, then maybe this isn't a good option yet. So this tree works for me. That doesn't mean that it's going to work for everyone. So just evaluate what you're growing in your yard already. Evaluate sort of the pest pressures that you're experiencing in your yard currently. And if all of those things check out and you're satisfied what you have and you have more room to add, I would definitely pick this one up, or I would graft onto an existing tree like I did. I purchased the rootstock and I grafted Delight and Sprite on here. I know that Fruitwood Nursery, they're a group up here in California that grow and distribute scion wood. I know that they have them in stock pretty regularly. You can pick them up from Fruitwood Nursery, but otherwise you're going to have a really hard time finding these. So you won't find a cherry plum, or at least I never have, in Southern California at the grocery store. So if you're looking for something unique and different that isn't really in the farmer's market, or grocery aisles, then this does check that box, and it is a good pickup. So hey, I just had one more thing come to my mind. Before I close out this video, I want to say that I just had a second cherry plum and it wasn't quite ripe. And the ripe cherry plums are going to have a jelly-like consistency. So if you are a fan of the astringent persimmons, the ones that you have to wait until they turn into mush before you can eat them, if you like that taste and that texture, then you may like cherry plums. If that's not for you, if you like the crunchy, non-astringent persimmons, then I would actually say avoid cherry plums, because I just had one here that was a little crunchy and it was just way too sour. Like I said, the sourness versus the flesh, the ratios are just off because of the fruit size. So I think the best way to think about this here is if you like those persimmons that are astringent, that get soft, go for a cherry plum. If not, if you like the crunchy ones and you don't like that texture, maybe you should go ahead and skip this one.